In your article, Doubting 101, you delve into the two types of doubt as discussed by Karl Barth, which are intellectual and existential. Can you dig more into what those are and what you mean by that? And are they healthy? Are they unhealthy? And how so?
Yeah, sure. So that's a distinction that I actually had discovered experientially before I knew that Karl Barth had ever described it. That was something that I first encountered doing office hours with students and in my own life. And basically, the thing that I would say is a lot of times a student would come into my office and they would have a problem that was sort of felt like an intellectual problem, something like, okay, explain to me how an all-powerful God could allow evils to happen in the world. And so the problem was framed as intellectual. But I started discovering as I engaged with students who had these sorts of questions that, man, over and over again, once we got into, okay, well, where did this problem sort of start for you? Where did this particular concern emerge? That for most of my students, the initial breach had actually been experiential and relational. Something had happened to somebody they loved, and so they had taken that relational experience of sort of a breach in their sort of feeling like God can be trusted, and then found an intellectual sort of argument to overlay on top of that. I think mostly because it would just make them feel better about bringing it forward, about entertaining it. It was sort of, it felt like it was more legitimate, I think, to them to sort of cast it in intellectual terms as opposed to just admitting that really, like, for the most part, the thing that was going on with them was personal. This was a question of, like, look, I trusted you and you didn't come through. How can I trust you again, with respect to God? And so the longer I did that with office hours, the more I started to realize that it didn't do a lot of good to just address the question on the intellectual level. The first thing I needed to know is what happened. Why is this troubling to you? And then we could start talking about. I mean, there are good intellectual answers to the intellectual questions. It just turns out that if your question isn't actually intellectual, the intellectual answers don't help, right? The
Mm, yeah.
intellectual answers are if they're just a cover for something that goes a lot deeper. It's just way more helpful to address the deeper thing.